Hi, it's Loren Lockman from the Tanglewood Wellness Center, and I'm going to be speaking a little bit today about the 7 keys to optimal health. I've been asked to give a summary for our fasting guests here, and you know when we often talk about diet and we talk about fasting a lot here at Tanglewood, but what you want to understand is that creating the highest level of health actually requires that we meet not just our body's need to cleanse and heal itself through fasting, not just the body's need for optimal nutrition through the proper diet, but we need to meet all of the body's needs as well as we can. And that achieving the highest level of health can only happen when we're doing this. We're meeting all of the body's needs. So, there are people that think, well, because I eat well, I can do whatever I want with the other things. Or because I exercise 3 hours a day, it doesn't matter what I eat. And we've talked before about people that are fit without being healthy. Just exercising without paying attention to optimal diet's not going to get you very far. As we've seen over and over again with college and high school and even some professional athletes that dropped dead of heart attacks while playing their game. They're fit, but they weren't healthy. Okay, 2 very different things. So in order to create the highest level of health, we need to meet all of the body's needs. And what I'd like to do today is summarize for you what those needs are, each of those keys. We've already mentioned a couple of them. The first one, of course, that most people think about is diet. And we've, here as a group, most of us, we have some new folks with us now, we've talked about the continuum of all possible diet choices. We've talked about the fact that anytime you improve your diet, anytime you make it better, wherever it was before, as long as you make it better than it was, you're going to see a corresponding increase in your level of health. This is because your body's always attempting to take itself to the highest level of health and balance possible. At the same time, if what you want is to create the highest level of health and vitality possible, then you must consume the optimal diet, because every time you make compromises to that diet, those compromises have an impact on what you're able to create for yourself in terms of your level of health and vitality. So when we're looking at diet, we're talking about is how do we create, with each of the keys. My goal is going to be to explain to you what I believe, years of experience with many clients, thousands of people, what I believe is optimal in each case. Okay, now obviously, once you know it's optimal, you're empowered to do whatever you choose to do. So you may not choose to eat an optimal diet, but if you don't know what it is, you can't do it. I mean, I guess you might hit it by accident, right? But it's pretty unlikely to happen if you don't know what it is. So don't be turned off if what you're hearing sounds more than you're willing to do. It's not an all or nothing thing. You can adopt as much or as little as you want to. Again, the key is to understand only when you make all the best choices possible can you possibly create the highest level of health and vitality for yourself. Compromises in any one of these keys are going to have a corresponding negative impact on your ability to manifest the highest level of health and vitality. So with diet, we're looking at a raw vegan diet that's based primarily on fruit. If you've seen my videos, this isn't surprising to you. It includes soft, tender, leafy greens. And remember that anything that contains seeds is a fruit, right? Fruit means fleshy covering of seeds. So cucumbers, avocado, tomatoes, peppers, these are all fruits. Anything cooked, anything processed in any way, whether it's processed in a factory of some kind, which is probably worse, or you're processing at home, it is compromised. Okay, you've oxidized, you've destroyed much of the nutrient content. You may be taking in massive concentrations. You've changed the balance of nutrients and eliminated some of the essential cofactors. If you're juicing and eliminating some of the fiber, you're eliminating nutrients that are bound up in the fiber. The best is always whole foods, organic, fruit ripe, and obviously raw, absolutely. So that's diet, and that's probably the simplest and the most common piece for many people. Everyone is aware, okay, I need to be looking at my diet, but there's much more than that, and you want to understand that it's about all of it. Fasting, which I already mentioned, is something that not so many people are aware of. And everyone here is aware of this because you guys all came here to fast. So you know about this. Many other people do too. But it has been largely lost to our culture. And what I want to point out is that no matter how good your diet is, we focus a lot, nutrition focuses a lot on what you're actually putting in your mouth. As long as you get it in your mouth, everything should be fine. What I want you to understand is that creating the highest level of health has much less to do with what goes in your mouth than it does with what goes into your cells. What's actually reaching your cells, right? Because you could be eating the highest quality food. If you're not digesting it, you can't absorb it. And if you don't absorb it, you can't assimilate it. Okay? And if you don't assimilate it, it's not available to you. So it doesn't matter how perfect your diet is. It has to be something that is easy for your body to efficiently digest, that you're able to absorb, that you can assimilate. And no matter how good the diet is, if your body's not working properly, this will create many of the issues. And again, you may have seen me talk about this in videos before, but we have frequently seen nutrient deficiencies eliminated while people are fasting. So they come in. Last one was a young woman who had a clinical magnesium deficiency, was taking massive magnesium supplements, and had issues that disappeared with supplementation. But she contacted me. I encouraged her to get off the supplements. She came to fast, and while fasting, all of her issues disappeared. So what does this mean? Well, she wasn't consuming any magnesium, but if the issues disappeared, then it means her body must have been better able to access magnesium that was already there. So again, it's just one more instance of the body not being able to get what it needs, even though it's there. All right? So just as important as consuming the right diet is ensuring that your body is able to properly digest and assimilate that food. Fasting allows us to do that. It also allows the body to heal itself. So, like every other species on the planet, our bodies are completely self-healing. This isn't necessarily apparent to most people. We live in a culture where we medicate everything, where there's a substance to take no matter what's going on. We look for some magic bullet. But if you've ever broken a bone, you've experienced this, although you may not have realized it. I mean, you break a bone, you go to a doctor who sets the bone. Some people think that the bone heals because the doctor set it. The bone heals straight because the doctor set it. It would have healed anyway. Okay? I'm evidence of this several times. I have 3 broken fingers, 3 fingers that have been broken, one of them twice. They're not straight anymore because I never had any of them set. They simply healed by themselves. They all work. The body heals itself. It doesn't need a doctor. Again, you break a bone, you might want it to be straight. That one you can see is no longer straight. You might want it to be straight, but it's going to heal anyway. Okay, because that's what the body does. And no matter what's going on, your body will heal itself if it has the opportunity. The problem is that the restorative processes, cleansing, healing, growth, repair, all require a tremendous amount of energy. So most of us don't have the energy necessary to do that restorative work while we're processing food. And it's not just human beings. Remember, there are roughly 800,000 other species on the planet. Every one of them, when sick enough or badly enough injured, will lie down and stop eating. They know instinctively that healing and cleansing require complete rest, which means processing no food. Okay, so those first 2, these are the ones we've covered over and over again here at Tanglewood. You've probably heard me talk about these before. But there are 5 more areas that are equally important. 5 more. Let's see if any of you can help me out with this. What are some of the other areas you think might be important? Exercise, absolutely. We live in bodies that are designed to be moving all the time. We are not designed to be stagnant. And we live in a world today, if you're in the United States or Western Europe, you probably most people work at jobs that require no real physical labor. You show up at work, you sit in a chair behind a desk, you do whatever you do. At the end of the day, you go home. You've been sitting there all day. Aside from getting up to get coffee or go to the bathroom, probably not really moving very much. And then you go home and you sit in a car, you sit on a bus, you sit on a train to get home, you sit at the dinner table, and then you sit in front of the TV, and then on Sunday you play a game of tennis. And you think, well, I'm pretty active, right? That doesn't work. Imagine that we were actually living in our natural habitat, right? In the tropical jungle, not in a house in the tropical jungle, but in the jungle itself. What will we be doing? Well, if we wanted to eat, we'd probably have to climb trees sometimes. I don't know about you guys. I've had many students here who weren't able to pull themselves up. They couldn't do a single pull-up. Well, if they had to get into a tree that way, they'd be in deep doo-doo. They'd be in big trouble, okay? Because there might not be any food available. It's all up there. Now, the oranges don't fall off the tree. Most of the time, you have to pick them. A lot of things, but you want to get it when it's really perfect, you have to go up there and get it. A lot of people can't do that. So it's not just being able to eat. The fact is that for our bodies to function properly, we actually need a level of muscle mass, of body composition that supports the whole system functioning properly. So if we're walking around with not enough muscle, nothing else we do is going to bring us to a level of perfect health, because the body needs that in order to work properly. Okay? And it all does come back to what would have happened evolutionarily. If we didn't have enough muscle, we wouldn't have survived in the natural world. But the way the body functions now, without that activity, things don't go very well. They don't work very well. So making sure that we're staying physically active is important. Now, how much activity is another question. And we'll talk about this more another day. But, be clear that some physical activity is different than working out 3 or 4 hours a day. There are people that work out hours a day, and this is, in my opinion, this is likely not so beneficial most of the time. It's actually likely to be a drain on the system for most bodies, and not what our bodies were designed for. I'm talking about intense physical workout. If you're in great shape and healthy, and you want to be physically active, enjoying whatever it might be, dancing, yoga, for me it's body surfing, or riding a bike, or rock climbing, or hiking. You can do that for hours at a time, that's no problem. But I'm talking about intense workouts for 2 or 3 hours. That's not necessarily going to be beneficial to most people, okay? But the physical activity is absolutely a critical component. And ideally, I would suggest there's some physical activity every single day. Don't put it all off until the weekend and think you're going to be able to catch up from a week's worth of sitting on your butt. It's not going to work. You're going to want to do something. Now, we're going to do an exercise talk soon. Sorry, Kat, it didn't happen before you're leaving soon. But I can show you guys how you can get all the exercise you need in 15 or 20 minutes a day. Now, it's fine if you can do more than that, but the point is, you can make 15 minutes a day, right? I mean, you can get up 15 minutes earlier if you need to. There's a way to create 15 more minutes simply by being more efficient. And anybody can do that much if they're willing to. So the I don't have time thing, that's an excuse that you don't need to allow yourself anymore. If you really want to be as healthy as possible, you need to be moving your body, and I can show you how to do that another time. The corollary to exercise and activity is just as important. What's the corollary? Rest and sleep, exactly. Yeah, and many people are under-rested. This happens all the time. I see people who are busy and successful and they have a lot going on in their lives, but who are only sleeping 5, 6, 7 hours a night. And I've seen no evidence that that's enough for most people. Every study I've looked at on sleep says the average human being needs at least 8 hours a night. And again, if you look at what would you do if you lived in the jungle, remember at the equator, there's 12 hours of darkness every single day of the year. What are you going to do? We don't see very well in the jungle at night. right, in the dark. So if you've got no light, you've got no flashlight, what are you going to do when it gets dark? You're probably going to want to settle down. And you're going to stay there until it gets light, which means a minimum of 10 or 11 hours of rest every single night of the year. That is what I would suggest is probably optimal for most people. And, you know, I encourage, just as with you guys here, I've said to you before, you don't want to worry about the stuff you can't control. So you can't make yourself sleep unless you take a drug. You can take a sleeping pill, but that's not really sleep. That's like you're knocking yourself out, you're unconscious, but your body's not getting the same deep level of sleep it would get normally, naturally. So the only thing you can do, you can't make yourself sleep, but you can give yourself the optimal conditions to sleep as well as possible. You can give yourself a dark room, cool, not too cold, but not too warm either. You can ensure, you know, that there's no distractions from noise. So if you're living in the middle of a city in a place that you know, there's a disco across the street. I remember once I was speaking in Amsterdam, Holland, and I was staying with some very lovely people that had arranged my talks there, but they lived across the street from a nightclub that closed at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And it was busy all night long, people coming and going, cars, motorcycles, etc. And then at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, all these drunks pile out in the street and it's noisy for another hour. You know, and I said to them this first, I'm like, how do you guys sleep through? Oh, we're used to it. We just keep all the windows closed. Like, I'd rather have fresh air. I'd rather be in a place where I don't have to close my windows against street noise. And if it were me, I simply wouldn't live there. I just wouldn't do it. My health is more important than anything else to me. So I would create a situation where I could be living in a place that was convenient to where I wanted it to be convenient to, perhaps, but where it was quieter than that. Okay? So, you know, if this describes your living situation, and you may, by the way, you may feel like, well, it doesn't even distract me. I don't even notice it anymore. Oh, in fact, I remember when I moved from the suburbs of Washington, D.C. into the city when I was 16. I was living half a block off of New Hampshire Avenue, which is a very busy main thoroughfare. There was sirens all night long. And 3, 4, 5 times a night, I was awakened by the noise from the street, sirens, police cars, ambulances, whatever it might have been. You know, this is how it is in a city. But after I was there, for 4 or 5 days, I stopped waking up all the time. But let me ask you a question. Do you think that the fact that I didn't wake up means that that noise wasn't affecting me? I don't think so. My central nervous system was still registering that noise. It was still affecting me. It was just that my brain had said, you don't have to get up for this. This is a normal thing. Don't worry about it. But my level of rest would have been much less than it would have been had I been in a place where that noise wasn't going on all night long. Okay? So if you live in a city, I mean, you might have a tough thing here to deal with, because in many cities, there's going to be noise almost anywhere. I would seek out a quieter place. I mean, I haven't lived in the city now for a long time. And that's one of the reasons why. It's only one of them. That's a good segue to the next one, right? So moving on from rest and sleep, what else is important? Well, how about the environment, right? The environment that we're in. We've been talking about noise, but now what I'm talking about is air and water, right? That's the environment. This is how I went from 8 keys to 7 keys. So the air that you breathe is critically important, right? You said earlier there's only 2 kinds of air. We've got clean air and we've got dirty air. That's basically all there is. And if you're living in a city, if you're living in LA, if you're living in Denver, if you're living in a lot of cities in the U.S., you're breathing very polluted air. It's probably the same in San Jose. You've got a city here in Costa Rica, you got a city that's surrounded by mountains. All the smog gets trapped and can't go anywhere. That's not a good situation. Because in order to create the highest level of health, you need to be taking pure, clean air into your system. Now, if you're in a situation where you feel like you can't move, and the truth about that is, of course, is that you can do whatever you choose to do. But if for whatever reason you don't choose to make that move, that's okay. It just means it's even more important that you handle all of the other keys that you can handle, because you can't do much about the air pollution out in your city. Not you personally. Of course, you can get out there and campaign for rooftop gardens and more trees and less emissions control, things like that. But you can't personally overnight. You can't affect the conditions of the air in your city. But what if you were to control all the other things that you could control, so that your body was much better able to deal with that one source of pollution that you didn't have much control over? That would have a significant impact. In fact, because most of us spend most of our time today in buildings, in your home, in your office, in your place of work, who controls the air quality inside your home? Well, to a large extent, you do. Well, how about inside your place of work? You do. You may not realize this, but what you bring into that space, including the paint you use, the furnishings that you have, the rugs that you bring in, the curtains, whether you know this or not, all commercial fabrics are treated with chemicals to make them fire retardant, often to protect them from staining. The problem is that these chemicals break down over time. Okay, they off-gas, they put toxic fumes into the air. Much of the furniture available today is made of particle board. It's pressed wood, so it might have a real wood veneer on it, but it's not solid wood. And the particle board itself is made with glues that put lots of toxic fumes into the air. And so now, if the stuff is old, if you've got old things in your house, they've been there for a while already, you don't have to worry too much about this. But new furniture, new carpets, new drapes, new upholstery, how about vinyl? You get a new vinyl shower curtain, that smell of the vinyl. Vinyl is one of the most toxic substances you can bring into your home. If you can smell that smell, you're breathing in very toxic fumes. So you may have noticed we don't have vinyl shower curtains here, right? You guys have cloth shower curtains. There's no vinyl, okay, because there's no off-gassing. You may have noticed that our furniture here is solid wood, which I've had built, or natural fibers. That our rugs are natural, untreated fibers, okay? These are the things that create a healthy space, and it makes an enormous difference. Our first location was in a home in the suburbs, right outside of Washington, D.C., just a couple miles from the city line. It was a neighborhood of big houses, and they were on relatively small lots, quarter-acre lots, so the house took up most of the lot. You could almost touch your neighbor if you both held your hands out, saw your windows, not exactly, but nothing particularly special about the house that we were in. It was the way it was furnished and finished with no man-made materials and no man-made products. And within 15 minutes of walking into that building, almost every single person would walk in and say something like, "Wow, there's something about the energy in here." And it might have been partly because of what we were up to there. The intention was to heal people, but it was primarily, I think, because the space was clean. It was clean air. It was natural materials. There were a lot of plants around, and that makes a difference because it's bringing this living energy into the space without being affected by the toxicity that exists in most places. All plastics break down and off-gas, put toxic fumes into the environment. So it's hard not to have plastic around today. You have a computer, it's probably plastic, or a lot of it is. But I would encourage you not to use plastic for anything that doesn't need to be plastic. So in most places where we're able to find some other material, we don't use plastic. We provide glasses, glass pitchers. The plastic cups are really here because there's a pool. I don't want glass around the pool. Broken glass in a pool is kind of a bit of a problem. Hard to see and very dangerous. That's why there's plastic here. Otherwise, I would never have plastic cups at all. Okay? So if you have them in your home, if you don't have little children, I'd be careful. If you're drinking from a plastic bottle, you want to be careful because it will break down over time and it's putting plastic into your body. It's not really a good idea. Some things to be aware of. So, air quality. Now, with anything else, it's like with food. We can have the best food, but if your body can't actually properly digest and assimilate, it doesn't help you. The same is true with air. Today, many people, perhaps from years of carrying so much stress around from years of suppressed emotions, don't breathe very deeply. Most people are breathing into solely the uppermost portion of their lungs and not using the entire lung capacity. And that has a huge impact on our health because we wind up acidifying the body by shallow breathing. So even if you've got the highest quality air, you need to learn how to breathe deeply. And this is something you can simply practice. Okay? You can sit quietly and you can practice breathing deeply, exhaling completely. And I would have the exhale control the breath. I mean, there are many kinds of breathing exercises you can do, but one simple one is exhale completely, pause, and allow the vacuum you created to create the full inhale. And then repeat and take it slowly. A good, close old friend of mine, Michael Grant White, breathing.com, amazing stuff. Now, he teaches that the slower you breathe, the longer you live. You want to know how well someone's going to do, what kind of longevity they're likely to see? You simply count the number of breaths they take per minute. Okay? So, and this is all cardiovascular system. So if your pulse rate is high, your breathing rate is probably high too. And you can improve that by simply working on it, right? You can do that by doing intense aerobic exercise, like running up a hill. It doesn't have to be very long. It doesn't have to be yet. Tomorrow or after lunch. But there's a way to get your heart really pumping. And it's amazing how much benefit you get. In the same way that skipping rope for 15 minutes is worth an hour of running.
It really pumped yesterday, just walking.
Just walking. Well, it's at this point, after fasting 26 days, just a walk may be intense for you. That's why you start with just walking and not so far. Just walking. But you're still early in the refeeding process. By the time you guys have been refeeding for 4 or 5 days, most of you are going to be ready for more intense exercise. And I want you to ramp it up slowly. There's no rush. You've got the rest of your life. You've created here a foundation to build on to create an incredible level of health and vitality. I told you guys from the beginning, A, your body doesn't stop detoxing when you start eating. B, it doesn't even reach 100% until 6 weeks out, which is why you get a 6-week plan from me, to be sure. And I think you all know this, you get a free consultation with me on the phone 4 or 5 weeks after you leave here as well. Okay, you're responsible for scheduling that, but you all have one coming. You just have to let me know you're ready to talk. And I'll be happy to get on the phone with you and make sure that you're on track, see if there's anything I can do to help you. Often there are misconceptions people have, but the point is, until you're able to breathe well and deeply on a consistent basis, you could be living in the most pristine place on the planet, and that pure air wouldn't be helping you very much.
Is it healthy in a place like LA, which is very polluted, to do deep breathing on a daily basis?
Well, it's still healthier than shallow breathing. You're still breathing the same polluted air, but now you're also acidifying the body from that. But to me, it's crazy to run down the side of the highway in a place like LA. Right? So you want to run? Go up there are parks everywhere, right? Go up into the mountains someplace where there's no car. Go on the beach where there's no cars, or the beach is great. Now, these are the places, we got a couple of lizards chasing each other over there. These are the places, if you're in a place like LA, these are the places to go. You live in New York, go to Central Park. Go to a place where you've got a lot of area with no cars and a lot of trees. But, it's crazy. Everywhere I go, I travel to speak, I see people jogging along major roads. I'm like, why don't you just suck on a tailpipe? This doesn't make any sense to me, because you're making the body work hard and taking in the most toxic air you can get in the whole town. It's probably right there. That doesn't make sense. Pay attention to that. So air is one piece, water is the other piece of the environment. And this is critical too, and this should be obvious to those of you that have been here with me now for 4 or 5 weeks. For those of you that just got here yesterday, this may not be obvious yet, but some of you have heard me talk about this before. You've fasted with me before. Most people out there are pretty seriously dehydrated. And so hydration, water, and the connection with how the body uses it, this is critically important. And, if you're thinking that because you're eating a raw or mostly raw vegan diet, or because you drink a lot of green juices or smoothies, if you think you're hydrated, or maybe because you drink tons of water, or perhaps because your urine is clear, because people out there are spreading this misinformation. If your urine's clear, it means you're hydrated. No, it doesn't. It means your urine is clear. Right? If you guzzle a bunch of water, it's going to run right through you. Your urine's going to be clear. But that doesn't make you hydrated. Okay? Getting hydrated is a whole different process. And having measured the cellular hydration of more than 2,000 people, I rarely see anyone really well hydrated until they've gotten their body clean, and unless, after doing so, they're making excellent choices. Okay? So water is critically important because our bodies are mostly water, or should be. If you're carrying, if you're obese, then you are carrying a whole bunch of fat which contains no water. And even if you're not obese, again, most people are severely dehydrated because your lean tissue should be 80% water, and the average person's is between 66, 67, 69%. The average person's walking around about 85% hydrated or worse. And that has significant ramifications for every single function of our being. Everything is affected. How your heart works, how your brain works, how your eyes work, how your muscles work, how your joints work, how your elimination system works. Everything is affected by whether or not there's enough water in the body. And you can't get in there by drinking it. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work because your body doesn't use that water, doesn't assimilate it the same way it does the perfect water in our perfect foods. And even that water doesn't get assimilated until the body gets clean and can actually use it instead of trying to put it into cleansing. So getting the body clean is a critical piece, but ultimately, you probably do need to be drinking water, no matter what you're eating, until your body is very, very well hydrated, at which point you may find you need very little water. Until then, the best that you can do is to be sure that you are drinking pure water. My recommendation is pure spring water. If you can find pure spring water. Now, don't make the mistake of thinking that because it comes out of the ground, it's automatically fit to drink. Unfortunately, most of the water in the ground today is polluted all over the planet. Okay, we've done this. This has happened by human hands. We've created problems everywhere. And if the water is polluted, if the groundwater is toxic, then the fact that it's spring water isn't going to help you. Okay, so be clear about that. But if you've got pure spring water, you can't do any better than that. You can't do better because this is what nature provides to us, and we're never going to improve on nature. So, it's funny, I have people arguing with me, well, spring water is acidic and water should be alkaline. Who says water should be alkaline? Let me suggest to you that if nature provides slightly acidic water, that's probably okay. Because we're not going to be healthy unless we have an alkalinizer? I don't think so. Okay, the animals on the planet, the 800,000 of them that rely on that water coming up out of the ground, they do perfectly well, even without their expensive machines. We don't need expensive machines. Okay, we just need pure water. Now, if you don't have a source of pure groundwater, what you might want to do is reverse osmosis. In my opinion, that's the next best option with other purification methods. So you can go through charcoal, you can use ultraviolet light to purify these things as well. But I'm not a fan of distilled water. Some people do perfectly fine with it, but it's not my choice. Getting enough water and having the water be pure is important. Now, you guys are looking at me. You can see the pool behind me. You guys already know we've got about a beautiful pool right here on site, and yet in the 6 or 7 months I've been here, I don't know how many of you know that I swam competitively for 16, 17 years, from the time I was 6 years old until I finished college. I played water polo in college. Okay, I spent a lot of time in pools. In 7 months that I've been on this site, I've yet to be in that pool. Why not? Because it's chlorinated water, and chlorine's very toxic. I believe, I can't prove this, but I believe one of the reasons I got so sick when I was 23 was because I'd spent so much time in pools. Okay, so I don't go in the pool. I wouldn't encourage you guys to go in the pool either. And if you live in a place with a chlorinated pool, I would stay out of it. Okay, if it's your pool, you might want to look into using another system. Now, those of you that are here probably know I am currently leasing this place, don't own it, and have already pushed the limit of how much I'm willing to invest right now in someone else's property. So changing the pool system isn't going to happen right now. At some point, if I can buy this place, we will offer a pool that's not full of chlorine. In the meantime, my agreement is to maintain it full. The government requires that it be maintained at a certain pH, and so we're going to keep chlorinating because that's what we have to do. That's what I've agreed to do. But just understand that bathing in water, whether it's in a pool or it's in your own home shower, if it's chlorinated water, this is a problem. It's been said that in 10 minutes, your body absorbs as much chlorine as if you drank 10 glasses of chlorinated water. I can't verify that, but I can tell you it makes an enormous difference. And you'll feel the difference. So the single best, least expensive investment you can make in your health is a $40 or $50 shower filter. You unscrew the shower head, you screw this thing on, you put the shower head back on, and it takes 99% of the chlorine out of your shower water. And you'll feel it on your skin. Your skin will be softer, your hair will be nicer, and you're not taking this toxic substance into your body. So get yourself a shower filter if you don't have one, and understand that what you drink and all the water you expose yourself to is a problem. Can be a problem, can be a benefit or a problem. It's an issue. It's something we need to be concerned about. Okay, hydration is critical. So that's the environment. Let's see. So far, we've covered diet and cleansing the body through fasting. We've talked about rest and sleep and exercise and activity, and now we've talked about air and water. So can anyone think of anything else that's left over that we haven't already covered? Sunlight is the one that many people often forget about. And we've all grown up in this era where the sun is blamed for causing skin cancer and for creating problems, and many people avoid sunlight at all costs. I actually have seen this close to home because I have a younger sister who 20 years ago would spend every single vacation, every time she had a week or two of vacation, she would get on a plane and fly down to the tropics somewhere and go to a tropical island, Bahamas, wherever it was. And then she decided that the sun was going to cause skin cancer and make her look old and wrinkled. And so now, for the last 20 years, she never, ever exposes her skin to the sun. Ever. Like if she goes to the beach, she's under an umbrella all day long. She makes sure that she's completely covered up so she never gets any sunlight. And this is a problem because there is actually an epidemic of vitamin D deficiency. And you can eat all the fortified food you want, but it's not the same thing. Again, we're never going to improve on nature. Our bodies were designed to take sunlight and convert those photons with cholesterol that our body produces, not that we have to eat from outside, but the body produces itself, and create vitamin D. And this is the way we get our needs met. And it turns out there's actually many beneficial things that sunlight is doing for us. We talked about sunlight a little bit here just a week or so ago. It's a critical piece. And again, it's another good reason to be in the tropics because remember, we are tropical animals. We require this climate to live in. We can't, no matter where on the planet we are, we're creating a microclimate, microtropical climate all the time with clothing and heat and buildings and cars and fire, etc. Because we have to maintain our bodies in this climate. So one of the pieces is that we actually need exposure to sunlight. Now we don't need a lot of it here because the sun is so strong. So the people that grew up in this climate rarely, if ever, sunbathe. You don't see them doing a lot of sunbathing. They may go to the beach for an hour or two. Because, why would you sit on the beach all day long? I mean, us gringos go to the beach, many, not me, but go to the beach and lay out there all day long trying to get as tan as possible. But there's no need to do that, okay? And not necessarily any benefit in doing that either. I understand we all want to look like a movie star, but understand that you are potentially harming your body. and forcing your body to work harder. So I love the sun. I love the way it feels on my skin. I don't burn very easily. And when I'm out working in the garden or directing the gardeners, whatever, I'll often take my shirt off to increase my exposure. But again, none of you have ever seen me lie down for an hour on the ground trying to cook in the sun. It doesn't happen. I don't remember the last time I did that. I might have a meal sitting out in the sun, for 15 or 20 minutes, but that's probably maximum. And yet there's no problem getting enough. Here, just moving around outside day to day, you're going to get all the sunlight you need. In this climate, it doesn't take very much time because the sun is direct and very strong. Most people in the United States in the summertime can get their needs met with 20 to 30 minutes of exposure depending on where they live. And most people in the United States, that is everyone living north of the latitude that runs from LA to Atlanta, if you live north of that line, there are 4 or 5 months of the year where you cannot get enough sunlight. So say the scientists. Of course, they're looking at people that live in normally poor functioning bodies, not necessarily the most efficient bodies, but most people are not going to be able to get all the sunlight they need to get the vitamin D they need, according to scientists living north of that line. And we see that people living in the extremes, for instance, in the northern hemisphere, the Scandinavians, who get almost no sunlight at all, even in the summertime, it's going through a whole bunch of atmosphere to get there. And in the wintertime, there's no sun at all for some of the time, and very little light at all for 4 or 5 months of the year. And so you have the highest rates in the world of alcoholism, suicide, and depression. This is simply one of the negative impacts of not getting enough sunlight. Okay? So don't underestimate how important this one is. Here's a tip that most people don't realize. If you go outside on a bright, sunny, cold winter's day, and you can find or create a place where you're protected from the wind, you can sunbathe. And if you're living up north, you might need to do that to get enough sunlight. And you can do it almost regardless of the temperature. Now, for those folks listening up in the Yukon, up in northern Canada or Alaska, or these places where it might be 30, 40 below zero, this may not work so well. But up in New England, where it's probably 10 or 12 degrees, not much colder than that most of the time Fahrenheit, you can actually still get warm if you're in the sun. But you need to actually expose as much of your skin as possible and be sure that you're not being accosted by the wind, because the wind will cool you right down and you're not going to feel the warmth of the sun. As long as there's no wind, you can find or create a place where you're protected from the wind. The infrared rays of the other side of the spectrum, the infrared rays of the sun will actually penetrate your skin and warm you up from the inside. Okay? And this is why if you ever walked out to a dark colored car on a cold, sunny winter's day, the car is warm, even though the air is freezing cold. Okay, your body will do the same thing. It'll absorb those infrared rays and it'll warm you up. And you'll feel great and you'll be getting what you need, at least to a greater extent than if you don't go outside that time of year. Obviously, if you can, if you live up north, if you live in New England, you live in Alaska, you live in the Yukon, you need to get away. You need to actually get yourself into the tropics or subtropics every winter, at least for a while, to be able to get some sunlight in your eyes, on your skin, to give your body what it needs. Okay? All right, what else is there? How many have we covered? Anyone keeping track? That's 6 of them so far. Let's see, we've got diet, fasting, exercise and activity, rest and sleep, sunlight, environment. Spirituality, joy. Friends, happiness. I would put all of those things into one large category. What I would suggest is, spirituality is an interesting thing. What exactly does that mean? I would suggest it means different things to different people. For me, spirituality isn't about doing something. It's not about chanting Om and meditating with your legs crossed. It's not about practicing yoga. It's not about believing in esoteric things or reading esoteric books. For me, spirituality is simply about connecting with all of life around you. For me, that's what spirituality is. But that is a product, I believe, of all the rest. So when you're giving your body everything it needs and dealing with this last piece I'm about to give you, I think that's what develops naturally. That's a byproduct of doing what you need to do. It's not something you actually do. Okay, these are about the things that you can do or the things you need to focus on. I don't think you need to focus on spirituality. How about friends? Do you need to focus on friends? Is that important? Well, most of us certainly benefit from having friends and loving relationships. But to make it one of the essential keys, to me it has to be something that applies to every single human being. And I can imagine the yogi sitting on top of the mountain by himself, meditating, being perfectly fine, perfectly healthy, and not needing anything else. Okay? So while most of us certainly benefit from that, that too, I think that's not the need, that's a strategy to meet a need. So we want to separate the difference between the needs and the strategies to meet them. What's the actual need? What is it we're trying to get to?
Love.
Well, love is, I think, is our essence. You know, it's like saying, well, we want to focus on being alive. Well, if we do all these things, we will be alive, right? And if we do all these things, all of them, including this last one we haven't named yet, I think we will begin to embody love if we really do this last one. For me, the last one, this category, and these are all suggestions I hear all the time. But to me, they're all really part of or byproducts of creating a high level of emotional poise. Emotional poise. So what is emotional poise? Well, we all know what emotions are. What's poise mean? Anyone?
Equilibrium.
Equilibrium. Okay, so balance. What else? If we're poised, we are ready, right? So for me, emotional poise, sometimes it's easier to describe it this way. Any martial artists here? No? Okay, well, you've all seen martial arts. Everyone saw The Karate Kid. You start out in every martial art, there's a grounding stance. Everyone familiar with this? What a grounding stance looks like? Imagine, so you're going into a martial arts match. You're going to start in this grounding stance because you want to be balanced. You want to be ready. You want to be able to meet your opponent, warrior pose. There are various different poses, but it's always a grounding stance where you're grounded to the floor, you're balanced, you've got your weight centered where you want it, you're ready for your opponent, okay? That's a grounding stance. Imagine that instead of being in a grounding stance, you went into the ring to meet your opponent, standing on one foot, with your, bending over with your arms and legs stretched out, standing on one foot. Okay, how hard would it be for your opponent to put you on the mat? Probably not very hard. Okay, it's not a good position to meet an opponent in a martial arts match. I would suggest that many people are going through their lives maintaining that same posture emotionally. Okay, whereas they're going through their entire life. I'll see if I can be captured where emotionally we're doing this, right? So what happens? Someone looks at you funny or says something to you don't like, and bam, you're down on the mat emotionally. And many people spend their entire life recovering from one upset after another, constantly having to pick themselves up off the mat because they're allowing everything to affect them this way. This is what happens when we're living our life with this precarious emotional position, right? Have you ever heard someone say, or maybe thought yourself, if I could just get that new job, I'd be happy. Or if I can just get that girl or that guy, I'd be happy. Or if I could just have that promotion, I'd be happy. Or, if so-and-so would simply be nice to me, I'd be happy. And there are many other things we say along the same lines, but the point is this. What all those things have in common is that the people who are saying them are making things that are completely outside of their control, exterior to them. They're making their happiness dependent on those things. If you make your happiness dependent on things outside of yourself and outside of your control, you are likely to be unhappy most of the time. Okay? So, emotional poise is acknowledging the truth. I believe this is a truth, that your level of joy on a constant basis depends on your ability to create that joy or allow for that joy to come up on a moment-to-moment basis, and is completely independent of what's happening around you. So it's independent of the conditions. It's independent of where you are, and independent of who says what to you, and independent of how you may be feeling physically. I mean, that may seem counterintuitive. Can you be in pain and enjoy at the same time? I would suggest you can. Okay? I would suggest this is entirely possible. And until you learn how to do it, what's likely is that you're going to be picking yourself up throughout the rest of your life, one time after another. So creating a high level of health requires that we find a way to create this low level of emotional poise so that no matter what happens, we can continue to live our own lives with this very high level of equilibrium where we're feeling great, we're functioning well, because it's not dependent on anything else. Okay? So how we do that, we've talked about that, some of us have talked about that, we'll talk about this again soon. Those of you that are just getting here, we'll be doing this again soon. This is important stuff, and if you're watching this on YouTube, I've got other YouTube videos on creating a high level of emotional poise. You may want to check those out. This is a critical piece, and in fact, I like to joke that while each of these 7 keys is equally important, this one is more equally important than the others. Okay? Because you can know exactly what to do from a physical standpoint, from the standpoint of meeting your physical needs. If you don't have a high level of emotional poise, then what happens? When do most people eat the junk? When they're not feeling good, when they're trying to suppress emotions. So what if you didn't have a need to be suppressing emotions because you accepted every emotion that came up, and because you rarely even experienced anger or these kinds of, quote, negative emotions? They were simply far less present in your life, not because you were pretending that they weren't there, because that doesn't work. Okay? I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about, that's what we've been doing, is suppressing most of us, our whole lives. What I'm talking about instead is actually finding a way to interact with what's real in such a way that it no longer affects us in a negative way. So we don't have to suppress anger because we just don't get angry very often. Right? I mean, I believe that's what's possible. I can't say for sure that it is possible because I clearly haven't gotten there yet. But we can move in that direction. And the less that comes up for us, the easier it is for us to maintain. The less we need to be eating crap, the less we'll have those cravings for all that junk, because we won't have a need to suppress anything. We're already feeling perfectly well emotionally on an ongoing basis. And in fact, talking about cravings, I'll tell you what I found. People often think it's mostly about diet. But here's what I found is true. Anytime you're out of balance in any way, you're going to be much more likely to feel those cravings for the stuff you've decided perhaps you don't want to eat anymore. Okay, so if you're emotionally upset, it's likely to happen. But what if you don't get enough sleep? More likely to happen. Okay, if you're overtired, you're more likely to have these cravings. If you are not getting enough physical activity, you're much more likely to have these cravings. If you're not getting enough sunlight, you're much more. So all of these things, as I said, each of these keys is equally and critically important. And you need to find a way, if your goal only is to create the highest level of health and vitality, it's important that you find a way to meet each one of these 7 needs as well as you possibly can. Because if you're missing any one of them, you are not going to be functioning at your highest level possible. It's simply not possible. You can't do it. I have a client who I met years ago when I was on a lecture tour in LA, and he was a rock and roller, a very, very successful musician. And when I first met him, he looks like a rock and roll guy, and sure enough, that's what he did. And we met. In that first meeting, he bought the Creating Perfect Health System, which isn't something I talk about much, but it's a program I created more than 10 years ago, which concludes more than 15 hours of live lectures and seminars on audio and video, plus written material. And so it's a whole education. And I'm mentioning this because he left our first meeting with this entire educational program. He had basically everything I have to teach is in there, right? And it's unconditionally guaranteed. Well, he took this home, and he learned as much as he could. And about a year or two later, he came out to fast with me. We were still in the U.S. at the time. He came out to fast with me many years ago. And he went home, and he contacted me 6 months later for some coaching. And it was interesting because he had all this information, and he'd already spent a month with me, and there were still some things he was missing. So, to me, this stuff, I've been studying and thinking about and practicing and working with other people on how to create the highest level of health since I was 16 years old. And that was a long time ago, right? That was 36 years ago now. So, for me, this stuff is second nature. I don't have to think about it. I know what to do. It's all clear. It's obvious. Even the emotional piece, which is the hardest piece, I've had a lot of practice, a lot of time working on it. But for a lot of other people, it doesn't necessarily all seem quite as clear and obvious as it does to me. So he had all the information, but was still making some significant mistakes. And one of the things we talked about was he was a musician. Roger, forgive me, I believe he was a keyboard player, but I don't remember now, it was keyboard or bass. And he was like, well, you mean that's not enough exercise, playing the instrument? I'm like, yeah, no, that's not enough exercise. You need to be doing more than that. And he wasn't really interested in exercising. And so he wound up doing a consultation with me every year. And we would correct some of the issues that were still there. There's some things he was still not completely clear on. And he came out and fasted with me 3 times in all. And every year between fasts, we would be doing consultations. And every year we'd be talking about exercise, and I couldn't convince him. And finally, at his last fast, I convinced him, you need exercise. And I showed him some things he could do. I showed, look, 15 minutes a day. Just do 15 minutes a day and watch what happens. And sure enough, after he'd been with me for his last fast, we sent out one of our very erratic and irregularly scheduled newsletters. And he wrote back and said, Loren, it's great to hear from you, but I probably won't be coming back to fast with you again. I said, really? Why? He said, because I feel better than I've ever felt in my entire life. And he said, you know why? I finally started exercising. And I'm exercising every day. And it made all the difference in the world. He didn't change anything else. He just started adding that component, started building muscle, started moving his body regularly and consistently, and it shifted everything for him. So, again, it's not an hour or 2, 3 hours a day. 15, 20 minutes a day was all he needed to change everything, right? And I've seen this over and over again. So just be clear, each of these keys is critically and equally important. If you're willing to do what you need to do, and the truth is, before we started this, Francis here was talking about his mother, who back in the 50s ran a health retreat down in Argentina, where she would put people on much better diets and sometimes fast them, and she would teach one thing, one word. What was it? Simplicity, right? Simplicity. Yes. And folks, that's what I've been trying to teach you, for all this time that you've been here with me, and all the time I've been doing videos. If you're watching my videos, it's all about simplicity. We try to complicate things we don't need to. The simpler we make it, the easier it's going to be, the better we're going to do. And nature has made it as simple as possible. We don't need to make it any more complicated than that. Again, if you use the simple mind trick that I do, right? When I'm not clear about what should we be doing here, how much exercise should we be getting? Should we be doing Bikram yoga, right? So my simple trick is this. I'm in my tropical environment. What would I do under these conditions? Well, if it's 105 degrees, I'm not exercising. Are you? I'm probably looking for a cool stream I can go lay in, right? That's what every other the cat is smart enough to know that when it's 100 degrees, you don't move if you don't have to. So we're never going to improve on that natural instinct. We listen to our bodies. in the situations that nature would provide for us, if we were in our natural habitat, we're always going to get it right. Whether it's about sleep, whether it's about sunlight. You know, the animals. A cat loves the sun when it's cold. If you live in New England, it's a cold day and the sun's coming in through the window. Your cat, if you have a cat, is going to get in that window box and soak up the sun. But what does this cat do? What does Diablo do in the middle of a hot sunny afternoon? He'll follow me around, if you've noticed, and he'll lay in my shadow. And as soon as I get up and move, he moves to the shadow somewhere else. You know, he's like, the sun, that's hot, man. That doesn't feel good. Human beings, we've got this ego going on where I want to soak up the sun and tan the skin. Every other species is saying, maybe a little bit of sun feels good, but too much, I get hot, I get uncomfortable. Why would I do that? We want to get out of our minds and into our bodies, and then we're going to make the best choices we can. So, any questions about any of these 7 keys? Wow, I must have done a really good job. Go ahead.
If I work hard enough on these 7 keys, will I get rid of my food addiction?
Well, the food addictions, yeah, there's only really 3 keys. The answer is yes, but I would suggest it's not so much about working hard, right? I'd like you to eliminate that idea, that this is going to be hard work. To some extent, it might be challenging. It's simple, so it's not complicated at all. It may be hard in some ways, but if you get your body clean and you deal with the emotional piece, then you've dealt with both the psychological and the physical addiction. Those are the 2 sides of it. As long as you keep making all of the best choices possible, so your body stays as balanced as it can, then you won't find yourself craving toxic stuff. You know, part of it is you're 37, 38, I'm guessing.
I wish.
So, yeah, how old are you, Francis?
66.
So at 66 years of age, you've got a long history of going to certain substances, under certain conditions, right? And it's not conscious, but certain things happen, and we immediately go for this, we go for that. So what you need to do is create new choices and new habits. And when your body is in balance, you're going to find there are going to be far fewer instances of moving towards those things that you've always habitually used. So the answer is yes, essentially. Get these things handled, you'll be fine. Any other questions on the 7 keys? Okay. Well, thanks very much. I hope this has been helpful to you. If there's more information on virtually all of these keys, I believe, on my YouTube channel. So check out the other videos, and if you want to go deeper, you'll probably find the information you're looking for there. Bye-bye.